And he said now he understood how all these people growing through, some monk in the Middle Ages that gets a tumor is going to start having visions. If the tumor is in a place that pushes on the brain in the right way, he'll have visions that are really impossible to discern from normal reality. There is real or more real from that point of view than what's around him in the objective world that we can all touch and feel. So that put a different spin on it for Terrence, and I think it addressed that thing you were talking about very early of, are there people that are psychedelic without taking entheogens? Yeah, definitely. Some of them live under bridges. Some of them become really powerful artists. It's there. I mean, if those people are having these other experiences and they don't have much of a framework for it in Western culture, but we've begun to develop that framework with all these developments out of that period that have become neo-shamanism, the ayahuasca revolution that's happening, the rediscovery of DMT, and not only its rediscovery, its transformation into a completely unique bit of history. It's a catalyst that's been put into the world that has never been casually available, easily available, and that's going to change the profile of that whole world of alternative culture and people that are exploring their consciousness. So there are new developments in this whole thing that are impossible to take into account.
Mm-hmm.
Really can't understand what the unanticipated consequences of all this stuff is. So we have to live through it together, hold each other's hands, move along, help the people that are taking risks by getting them money. That's a crucial part of all of this. Try to get money to the people that are willing to go out in public and put their lives in danger. That's a real critical thing in any kind of social movement, is getting the support back from your community. And that's happening. Mm-hmm. That's all over the place now. That's why we can have things like Burning Man, and why we can have this entire network of festivals going off, and why the music dominates the media. And it's kind of become this background alternative, almost like opposite world to the corporate realism that most people wake up in every morning and, walk away with their zombie stare into their job.
Yeah. To your point, there's an ever-growing network of ayahuasca circles and ceremonies that are emerging around the country in very rapid fashion. And you and I talked a little bit about this when we got together, and we touched on the whole subject of analogs and things like that. But I just got wind of a guy, in a Western city who is actually a pretty successful restaurateur. I mean, we're talking, kind of a regional chain, and he's become a centerpiece for a Santo Daime experience in this city. So here this is exactly what you're talking about. This is somebody who is very successful on a corporate level, and yet they are spearheading this experience and this movement in this one place. And I think to a large extent, I don't know the person, but I think to a large extent, to balance out sort of the equation of their soul. And I'm seeing more and more of this happen. And your movie with Dennis McKenna's forthcoming book, when it eventually gets printed, I mean, I think, Ken, we're going to see a psychedelic resurgence coming very soon.
Well, I think we're in the middle of a psychedelic resurgence that you just outlined, and that it's thankfully still below the media horizon, and it's thankfully still in an relatively innocent phase, where people can more or less just walk in. If you've got enough nerve to do your thing, there's a place to do it. So if you're a musician, a jewelry designer, a single mom, whatever your scene is, there's a place in this community for you. And it's quite amazing to discover. I'm as amazed as anyone else. But it's a direct consequence of all these people that have been inspired to explore other dimensions of their humanity than they can do in a normal, everyday American context. And that's been provided by, like I said earlier, tantric sex, diets and food, all sorts of things that can occur. But the primary motivator, the primary engine of all this stuff has been the combined and collective experience of people altering their consciousness using psychoactive substances, mostly plant-based, to see that they're more than a body, to find out that they have a spirit, to find out that they have a heart, and that heart can guide them with more dependability than their brain can.
Yeah, that's a great and very salient point. In the production of the movie, you had some pretty interesting experiences around what I would call maybe the psychic imprint of Terrence, or his spirit, or his hologrammatic presence in sort of the post-production of the film. Can you talk about maybe just one or two of those instances?
Okay, yeah. I just occurred to me, I want to correct real quick. The title of the movie is the Terrence McKenna Experience, but that tape we've been listening to is from a segment inside the movie called Terra Lumina.
Okay.
Just for the record. I think what you're referring to most dramatically is encounters with Terrence after he's been dead, and at a wide range of those experiences, from just hearing him say something sarcastic in my subconscious at a funny, ironic moment, to very much more cogent encounters with a being that I know very well, and that I've been able to, I've been blessed by his presence in a world that I don't know how to describe, a realm that was not like tripping, not like dreaming, and certainly not like normal everyday consciousness. And that stuff's difficult to discuss in a kind of a brief framework, because I don't want to give the wrong impression about how I interpret those experiences and what it might mean to others. But I had one primary experience where I was visited by Terrence, and I was camping with my family, and we were at high altitude. I had undergone some very intense medical situations the very week before, and in the middle of the night I had this experience that lasted a very long time in terms of narrative. It took a long time for all the things to happen. We exchanged information, we hugged, we laughed, we cried a little bit, we explained some things to each other. It was a really complex event, and there were other human-type sentient beings that were helping to facilitate the situation that was going on, and they were paying no attention to me, but they were helping Terrence get himself ready to leave to the other country, they were saying, which I clearly considered to be death. So it was a very interesting and life-changing experience, to say the least, and it was something completely atypical. I've never had that thing happen with anybody else that I loved and died. I'm not a channeler. I'm not a theosophist. I really don't know what to think of it, except that I have a right to be able to make of it anything I want to. So I've tried to create out of those experiences a relationship where I can ask Terrence for his judgment on some particular detail in the production, or ask him about who would be better for certain kind of connections and who to be involved with in the business side. And I get these really funny, almost haiku kind of responses from a voice in my head that I call Terrence, and he tells me funny things and gives me suggestions. And they're always exactly the kind of thing he would have done in the world before death. So I thought that was pretty odd, and I don't tell that many people the story, and now I've just blasted it over the internet because I'm getting ready to be public with this movie anyway.
Right.
But the one strange element of it, and I invite the listeners to go check this out, is that I was looking for something on Reality Sandwich, which is a blog, not a blog, a website portal for all things psychedelic and related topics. That's very interesting, that if you don't know about it, I'm sure people would love to check it out. And I was looking for something about Terrence, and I stumbled into an article where somebody else was reporting a very similar after-death experience encounter with Terrence that included all the same, primary things that happened in my experience, including jokes and laughter and some tears and some hugging and some specific information, in my case, very specific information that he gave me to help me identify opportunities that would be arising in the near future in my life. And they have been very useful. That's all I can tell you, is that they've been incredibly real indicators of opportunities that came to me after the event. So,
wow.
When I read this article in Reality Sandwich, I scrolled down and to look at people's comments, and there were several other people in the comments section that said, wow, I had the same kind of experience with Terrence. So what does that mean? I don't really know. I mean, it's very interesting, though, that there's enough resonance with all these people to be moved to these extraordinary experiences with a skinny dead guy that wasn't really too much into spiritualism or anything like that. But he was also the kind of geeky science guy that would literally did say more than once, if I die first, keep your eyes and ears open. I'm going to try to see what's possible from that other side. Because a lot of the psychedelic experience, especially the more exotic parts of the DMT world and salvia and some other places, they seem to address the issue of the dead as a realm. And Terrence felt that it was a realm that had some limited capacity to engage the conscience and the mind of beings in this realm.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew he thought that. I knew he thought that that was a possibility. He didn't think it was true. He just thought it was a possibility, and that when I get to the other side, if I get there first, keep your eyes open, pay attention. One thing he constantly told me when these different kind of weird places we'd get was, don't give in to astonishment. Even though it seems as though the proper response to reality is astonishment, and in some ways it's the only response that makes sense, you have to hold it off at times to absorb what you're learning.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't just roll your eyes back in your head and do 300 DMT trips and make much of a difference in the world. You can make a bigger difference after one trip by simply understanding what it might mean to you, and that takes reflection and consideration and a depth of understanding that you build from experience, and you can't just buy that. You can't just put it in your lungs. You have to build that experience and put it in a context that makes sense and gives you insight into how to go forward.
Yeah, I that makes total sense. So one of the things I wanted to just touch on briefly, and then I wanted to kind of get to more of the nuts and bolts and where people can find your film and participate with you on the final stages if they so desire. I always felt as though the comparison between Terrence and Tim Leary was unfair, and I think that they're vastly different characters, and it's a kind of lump Terrence into Tim's bucket was just not doing Terrence justice. That was my feeling, in my opinion.
Well, whenever you say the sounds, the small mouth noises, Timothy Leary, you've kind of set up a whole universe of conundrums and confused loyalties, and where do you enter the story? It's very complicated. Personally, when I was a graduate student suffering from the American disease of growing up in suburbia, having Timothy Leary to read and to consider as an alternative intellectual position was essential, absolutely essential to my development and my evolution as a being, and to millions of people. That is true. That said, Timothy lived out a really rough narrative, especially near the end, and things were coming out and things were made aware that, had they been known at the time in a more grounded and widely based assessment, people would have had different views of what he was up to. I understand that. So I have kind of almost a bilocation with this topic. Mm-hmm. I honor Timothy because he really did lead me to some essential truths that I needed to discover, and made a bridge, an academic and intellectual bridge, into issues that could be seen as essentially psychedelic.